You guys see the screen from that angle, or? Okay.
Want me to turn off the light?
Yes, please. Some of you in the room know me from a previous stage of my life in which I supervised the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service office here in Yreka for 9 years. I was the executive secretary for the Klamath Task Force and represented Interior in the various negotiations on subjects which shall not be mentioned. When I retired 4.5 years ago, took a year off, and then I live in Mount Shasta, and realized I still have a strong emotional connection with birds and fish, and with kids learning about those things. And so I got involved on the board of the River Exchange. Let's see, I'm going to have to, I better wear these or I'll... The River Exchange was founded in 1996 with annual funding that came from the Cantera Trustee Council. The Trustee Council was established to distribute the settlement funds after the 1991 Cantera spill on the Union, at that time on the Southern Pacific Railroad. That spill in 1991 destroyed all life within the Sacramento River from Dunsmuir to Shasta Lake. Inverts, algae, plants, fish, some impact on mammals. And so there was a lot of controversy about how the river should be managed in subsequent years. The Cantera Council set up the opportunity for the River Exchange to serve as an educational organization in the Sacramento. It seems that many of the community believe that we are still funded from Cantera funds, but actually the Cantera settlement funds ended in 2004. So since that time, the River Exchange has been on other types of financial footing. In particular, 2012 to 2014, with a $590,000 grant from the Department of Water Resources, we coordinated and completed the IRWM, the Integrated Regional Watershed Management Plan, for the Upper Sac, the McLeod, and the Lower Pitt regions. For starters, this watershed is really different than watersheds on this side of the divide, because none of these watersheds have anatomy anymore. Shasta Dam cut off all, the construction of Shasta Dam in the 1940s, cut off, oh, it's down there. I found the secret code. It's underneath. And it really tickles. The construction of Shasta Dam cut off all anadromous fish into the Sacramento, McLeod, and Pitt rivers. So that changed the ecology there. It also results in a much different, and I will say somewhat more relaxed, regulatory atmosphere. As one who was pretty involved in that on this side of the divide, there are some advantages. So the IRWMP was completed in 2014, and then we received another grant from the National Forest Foundation to act as the admin secretary for the Regional Watershed Management Group. That's been a very important group, and primarily because it's the establishment of an RWMG through the IRWM process of the state of California that makes parties eligible for funds from Proposition 84, which was passed back in 2008, I believe it was. So just recently, the city of Mount Shasta got preliminary approval for their application for $4.2 million for upgrades in their water management. Well, first to put meters in the residences, on the residential connections in Mount Shasta, which has one of the highest per capita uses of water in the state right now, and then to improve some of their delivery lines. So the completion of the IRWM process was really important. Already we see that for one of our members in Mount Shasta, and we hope to have access to more funds in the future through IRWM. So that's just one of the roles that the River Exchange has been playing. In general, our mission is watershed stewardship education. And that involves education, restoration, assessments, and then and policy coordination. We are not an advocacy organization. We are essentially try to maintain an objective basis and provide information to all aspects of the community. There are a wide variety of potential watershed issues in the Upper Sacramento region. And the fact that these are on this list does not mean that we believe that they are at a crisis point or that they are in fact a serious problem. But these are questions that exist in the community. And as I came out of a scientific and management background, and I see the level of misinformation that exists on most of these issues, I think part of my impetus for being engaged here is to try to bring an objective approach to providing information on these various issues, including impacts of drought and climate, fish stocking versus wild trout, groundwater withdrawal, which is important around the town of Mount Shasta and McLeod in particular, invasive species. We have serious invasive plant issues on the Upper Sacramento, municipal wastewater with our three communities, railroad and highway safety, which I'm going to address in a little bit more, raising of Shasta Dam, which is a proposal ongoing by the Bureau of Reclamation, which will affect the lower part of our watershed. Salmon reintroduction. NOAA Fisheries has asked, to use a general term, the Bureau of Reclamation to do a pilot study of the potential for reintroducing salmon above Shasta Dam. And then about half of the watershed below the town of Mount Shasta, much of which is in Shasta County, by the way, not Siskiyou County, it's roughly divided between Forest Service lands and industrial timberlands. So the parts of the community notice and ask us questions about watershed impacts of the clear cuts that are visible along the I-5 corridor. And then something that's obviously very close to in concern for all of us, the impacts of wildfire. So each of these is while they are, as I said, they're not necessarily at crisis levels or even a true concern, they are all the bases for questions among parts of the community. And I see it as our mission to provide information on these things to keep an objective point of view on each of them. For instance, one of our educational efforts deals with New Zealand mud snails. New Zealand mud snails are found at 6 locations between Shasta Lake and Anderson now. The transport of these things, apparently by recreational fishers, is potentially a big impact on the Upper Sacramento and the McLeod. So I speak to fly fishing organizations all over Northern California, and this is one of the things I always bring up. Take care of your equipment. Just an example. The Cantera Bridge this was the scene of the 1991 disaster. The River Exchange and some of our principals were instrumental in negotiating the construction of this huge barrier at the Cantera Loop, which would, at least theoretically, by its size, it looks like it would keep train cars from falling into the river. However, there does remain an issue about keeping the trains on the tracks. In the last just about 2 years, there have been 2 derailments in the Sacramento Canyon. This one in January of 14, down in Shasta County, a car ended up in the river, but it did not rupture, and it was just carrying waste paper, and so it wasn't really a toxic issue. But then the other one occurred at the Cantera Bridge, with a northbound train pulled several cars. That's a big loop. You imagine pulling as trains are coming upslope. They've got a lot of gravity in the back end of that train, and the engines are pulling hard, and it tends, on a big curve, it tends to straighten out that line. And so that curve is right there on the river. So there was a derailment at the Cantera Bridge in June of 2013. It again was very fortunately, although there were cars within 150 feet of the river, they happened to be empty. There's only so much that a local not-for-profit can do to have any influence in this sort of environment, this kind of regulatory environment. There is a tremendous growing concern nationwide with tank car safety and the flaming tank car accidents that we have seen in the media that are resulting because the railroads are pulling more and more tank cars from the Bakken Formation in the Dakotas to the refining capacity around the edges of the continent. The refining capacity is in Texas and in California and so on, a long way from where the oil shale development is happening. And so essentially we have pipelines on wheels using the railroads around the United States, and the Sacramento Canyon is no exception. There's an increasing traffic of tank cars in the Sacramento Canyon. So all we can really do is try to make sure that the railroad, they certainly have no interest ever in having a spill. And the Union Pacific Railroad that owns the railroad now has done a lot to improve conditions. We just try to keep reminding them that we're here, this is our community. We hope you're on top of it. We had an educational event in June, which we had public affairs from Union Pacific, from the Office of Spill Prevention and Response, and from Siskiyou County Emergency Services, describing various aspects of the issue. So we do try to keep the community informed on this one. The other part of the transportation system is I-5 itself. And accidents both on the railroads and on I-5 statistically are very rare. The potential magnitude of these extremely rare events is substantial. So on January 1 of 2011, this truck went off the bridge right there where the bridge crosses the river at Dunsmuir. And that's the cab, and that's the river. This was very fortunate. This truck was carrying toilet paper. And there's still people in Dunsmuir who are using the salvaged items from this accident. But that's a very fortunate aside. It could have been a tanker full of fuel. So we have this constant flow of commerce up and down the I-5 corridor and the Union Pacific corridor. That's the commerce of the West Coast when you think about it. It all comes up and down the Sacramento corridor. So Caltrans and the railroad both do a pretty good job in trying to control things, but the risk does remain. Several years ago, I spoke about assessments. The River Exchange, with a number of cooperators, prepared this watershed assessment and management strategy for the Upper Sacramento River. And one of the things it really identified was that the greatest risk to the watershed is high-intensity wildfire. This is a picture from the Squaw Creek drainage, the Bagley fire. Squaw Creek is one of the tributaries to Shasta Lake. It's between the McLeod and the Pit. In 2012, there was a 40,000-acre wildfire there that was only about 12% high intensity, but it did serious watershed damage, primarily because only a few months after the fire and after the salvage logging had begun on the private land. You can actually see the checkerboard land pattern here. These places that have been salvaged are private industrial land. This is the boundary. This is the Forest Service land that has not been salvaged. That's probably standing there waiting to burn again someday. But the watershed impacts here were substantial because that fall there was a 50-year storm followed by two 25-year storms in the period of about 10 days. So a big load of debris hit Shasta Lake, and that's the Squaw Creek arm of Shasta Lake not long after the event. That creates water quality issues in the lake. It creates additional costs for the Central Valley Project, which has to pay the Forest Service to round all this stuff up so it doesn't get to the dam. So the issue of catastrophic fire, while it's certainly very important to communities and to ecological situations, it's also important to the water management system. And one of our long-term goals is to keep the community aware that it's a desirable thing to thin on the federal forests within reason. So again, in this education mode, this is something we try to focus on, is the risk of catastrophic fire. One of our main annual events is the river cleanup, which is done every fall. We get volunteers from around the community in Dunsmuir in particular. This year we collected over 300 pounds of trash along the upper Sacramento. Now, most of this does not occur right on the riverbank. The fishers themselves seem to be pretty good about not creating litter. But in the parking access areas that are close to the freeway and close to the river, we see a lot of accumulation of trash. That's really unfortunate because the recreational fishing industry is a very important part of the economy. If the first thing that visitors to the river find is a trashy environment, that's not a good thing for the community. So this is something we do every year to get local kids involved. So our status right now is, I think, just to be candid, it's probably not unreasonable to think that any organization is going to go through ups and downs. With the end of the Cantera funding and then the end of the IRWM funding, we are now down from 2.5 staff people to about 0.5. And we're down to four board members. The board is kind of out of gas, and it's time to recharge the river change. I mean, it's actually symptomatic that I'm serving as president and executive director. That's not the sign of a really thriving organization. I firmly believe that we've got the value there. There's a value proposition in that fishery, in that recreational community, to recharge the river's change. And it actually does my heart good to see the group from Scott Valley with 4 young people standing up here, none of whom, to my knowledge, were really involved when I was here with the Fish and Wildlife Service just 5 years ago. Is that right?
I was involved. I've seen you speak before that.
So one thing that we are, that did my heart good. I think we can do that. We are getting ready to move to a new office in Dunsmuir. A natural resource GIS mapping firm called FireWhat and their affiliate wildlandfire.com is a growing high-tech business in Dunsmuir whose business is essentially GIS and emergency management. They're also really interested in public education. So we're moving into their office with them, and we're all going together with Dunsmuir Schools to work on a project we're calling STEAM. You may have heard of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, math, but we threw in the word arts. And we're beginning to generate a new focus on education in the Dunsmuir schools to start with. FireWhat in particular, they are an associate of Esri, the developer of ArcView software. On November 19th, there is a GIS day in Dunsmuir in which Esri is coming and the chief cartographer for National Geographic is coming as a speaker. So the River Exchange is very pleased to be engaged with sort of a new group of river aficionados to combine with the same old and highly valued fly fishing community. So that's kind of I think a fair assessment of our status, where we are not in our strongest position in history, but we've got a lot to look forward to and a lot of potential there with natural resources in the Sacramento and McCloud Canyons, and the coming emphasis on science and technology and education. So if you wanted to learn more about the River Exchange, we've revamped our website recently at riverexchange.org. This picture to me kind of sums it all up. We've got the river, we've got the tracks, we've got the highway, we've got the mountains and the watershed. It's a very interesting place to work, and I hope that some of you will check us out. Thanks.